Hey everybody, it's Emily at ARG Schooling, and today I'm going to do a video about one of my favorite authors, Stephen King. I have been reading Stephen King's novels since the tender age of about 10, I think. I'm pretty sure I was about 10 years old the first time I picked up one of his books. My mother read him a lot and had a lot of his books around the house, so I would just pick those up. I remember going to my library when I was a kid and checking out lots of his books, and I've always been a fan. So I'm just going to show you some of his books, the ones I own that I've read, and talk about some of my favorites. And I'm going to give you a kind of an idea of like where to start if you've never read Stephen King before. I own quite a number of his books. I don't own all of them. There's quite a few I don't have yet, but I remember, I think, I don't know, maybe 12-ish, 13 years ago. No, longer than that. Maybe 15 years ago for Christmas, my husband got me a huge box of books that he got on eBay of Stephen King's paperbacks, and it was amazing. That was one of my favorite presents I think I've ever gotten. I think I want to say there was like 20 or 30 books in that box, and you'll see that I have a lot of really old, like 1980s vintage looking paperbacks, and that's what those are. And they're kind of, some of them are falling apart and I really need to get new ones. But anyway, I'm just going to kind of go through and show you all the books that I've read in no particular order, because literally I just have piles next to me right now. I've read The Dead Zone, Pet Sematary, The Tommyknockers, 4 Past Midnight, which is missing its cover and is pretty darn sad, The Gunslinger and the Drawing of the Three, Salem's Lot, Christine, Cujo, The Green Mile, Carrie, Needful Things, books are falling behind me, It, Different Seasons, The Cell, Gerald's Game, The Stand, On Writing, Firestarter, The Shining, Nightmares and Dreamscapes. So, some of my favorites from this pile I've already talked about in another video, which I will link above. I have a video about my top 5 favorite Stephen King novels, but I will just talk a little bit briefly about what I like about Stephen King's books. And that I like how a lot of his stories are all kind of connected because they almost all take place in the same area. He tends to have everything happening in Maine because he's from Maine, so he writes what he knows, which I like that a lot. And also, a lot of his characters, you'll notice like certain characters pop up over and over again, like Randall Flagg, for instance, comes up in The Stand. He comes up in Insomnia, which is another book I read but I don't own because I got it at the library. He comes up, oh, what other book does Randall Flagg come up in? I believe he comes up in the Dark Tower series. So he's in a lot of different things, and I just like that. I really enjoy when I'm reading something and it's like a little Easter egg, like, oh, I remember what he was in this book. And like the whole incident in Derry, Maine comes up in other books, and I think that is a really interesting aspect to his writing. And his books, I really appreciate that while some of them are like gross out scary, a lot of them are more like psychological scary, which I appreciate a lot because I don't always want the gross out. While I do enjoy that sometimes I just want something that's going to be more like next level scary, where it's more like in your mind, what you're thinking about is what makes it scary. And he also has a few books that aren't scary at all. Like The Green Mile, for instance, is just a beautiful story. It's got some elements that are, specific to Stephen King's writing, where he does have some gross out things. He does have a specific way of writing, a style of writing that I kind of tend to think of as King speak, where I don't know, I don't even begin to know how to explain it. He has this like inner monologuing that he does, sort of, and it's very much a Stephen King thing, where when you'll see it if you read enough of his books, and it's always there. It's just the way the characters think, and sometimes the way they dialogue, but it's oftentimes like in their inner thinking and the way they're thinking about a situation or relating a situation. You'll see that a lot in his books. I really love his short stories. I've read a lot of them. I own, I think, one other of his short story collections that I haven't read yet, Bazaar of Bad Dreams, I think. I've obviously Nightmares and Dreamscapes. This is like this quintessential gigantor volume of short stories that have, this has a lot of the like really familiar ones, like Lawnmower Man is in here. I've also really like his novellas. My favorite of his novella sets is Different Seasons, and I really love the stories in here. This one has The Shawshank Redemption, Apt Pupil, The Body. Those three right there are like my three favorite Stephen King adaptation movies, and I really loved all of the actual writing, the books. So that right there, that is just one of my favorite Stephen King short story novella collections. And if you're new to Stephen King and you don't know where to start and you don't want something that's really scary, I highly recommend The Green Mile, because this is more of a drama. It's about a man who has been wrongfully imprisoned and he's on death row, and sort of the story of how that comes to be and how the man who is in charge of him in the jail is trying to cope with the fact that he knows that this man is innocent, and how does he handle that. It's just, it's beautiful. I really love that story. If you want a scary book but you're not sure where to start with Carrie. It's really short. It's, I want to say, under 300 pages. It's not even 200 pages, I don't think. Yeah, my copy is like not even quite 250 pages. But it's really creepy. It's not scary as in like you're going to have nightmares from this. But it's scary, and what if that actually happened way. And it's one of those like quintessential girl gets bullied and then retaliates stories. And it's very satisfying, but it's also very sad. And it's one of my favorites. I think this was the first Stephen King book I ever read when I was about 10 or 11, yeah. And it's the first one I handed my daughter when she wanted to read Stephen King. I told her to read Carrie. It's just a really good story. Another great starting place is The Shining, because it is so creepy, but it's also really well written, and it's just, if you've seen the Stanley Kubrick version of this, it's not the same story. It is, there's similarities, but it's so different. The book is so much better. I really liked the book more than the movie, because some of the characters, specifically Wendy Torrance in the movie, are just so annoying. And Wendy Torrance is so much more tolerable in the book. Wendy Torrance in the book is much more interesting. And it is so creepy. I have Dr. Sleep, I just haven't read it yet, but that's the sequel to this story about what happens to Danny Torrance later down the road. But this is a great, especially if you live in a cold climate and you get a lot of snow, this is a creepy book to read in the winter time. And if it gets too scary, you can stick it in the freezer. But I have a lot of books that I haven't gotten to yet. I haven't read much of The Dark Tower. It kills me that I love Stephen King as much as I do, but I haven't read The Dark Tower yet. But I've started it like 3 or 4 different times, and I never get past the second book. I'm gonna do it. One of these days. I own like 5 out of the 7 books, I think. Maybe 6. I might have 6 of them. But I own a lot of them, and I have never read them. And it kills me, because that's like his magnum opus. And I love fantasy, so I should really like The Dark Tower, but I just can't quite get into it. But the movie's coming out this year, I believe, so I'm really hoping to try to get to it so I can hopefully get to it before the movie comes out. But I think I've read enough to know the movie, because I think the movie covers the first 2 books, possibly, and those are the ones that I've read. I've read The Gunslinger, and I've read The Drawing of the Three, and someday I'm going to read the rest of them. It's going to happen. Do you read a lot of Stephen King? Is he an author that you've read? If not, do you think you're going to try him? What book do you think you'll start with? If you have read him before, do you have a suggestion for where to start? I'd love to hear about it. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you guys in my next one. Happy reading. Bye!